Hello and welcome to a new series of videos entitled Lymph Uniting the World. I hope you like the title. We've made it up today. And this episode unites the UK and the USA with me, Matt Hazledine, and Angela Marquez, aka the Funky Lymphedema.
Thank you.
And I'm thrilled to be working with Angela. We've had several Zoom calls up until now, and they've been great fun. And I just had to do a recording to share much of what we've spoken about in the past for all of our followers and listeners and members. The one thing that drew us together, Angela, from the early days was the fact that we're essentially two lymphies that are trying to or actually making a difference and helping others to live better with lymphedema, aren't we?
Right, exactly. Just trying to manage and thrive in our daily life and share tips.
And exactly, and share tips and solutions, but also to reach out and say, you look, in most cases, the man from the UK and the lady from the US, between us, I think we've pretty much got most experiences of lymphedema
Mhm.
covered. And between us, we're hopefully going to share many solutions to those who are watching today. So can I kick things off by asking you, Angela, about your lymphedema journey and how it all started?
Yes. And first, I just again want to thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be a part of this. So, I was mine lymphedema is a result of cervical cancer treatment. So I was in 2007 had surgery for cervical cancer. Had chemo, radiation, surgery to remove the tumor. Fast forward 9 years later, I was in a parking lot walking. My ankle kind of turned in. Didn't think anything of it. Within that week, my ankle was swollen. I was like, "Oh, I just tweaked it." Then, within the week, my entire leg had swollen up, and went to the doc or called my doctor. He's like, "Get to ER," because he thought it was a blood clot that was happening.
Mhm.
So from that point forward of me going to ER, it was a series probably of 6 weeks of me going to six different doctors that I got the diagnosis that I had lymphedema. And honestly, it was not even on my radar that that's what it was. And to backtrack, during my cancer treatment, I was warned about getting lymphedema. However, maybe me not asking enough questions or being naive, it was presented in a way that if this happens, if you're at risk for lymphedema, but it usually happens within the first 3 years.
Mm.
So I didn't. Once I passed 3 years, it was like I said, not even that would ever happen. Didn't think that that was it. And so I was actually diagnosed by an interventional radiologist that I had lymphedema. So that was April of 2016.
Right.
Um, at the same time, I was also diagnosed with May-Thurner syndrome. So that is where the right iliac artery is compressing the left iliac vein. That was in my left leg as well. So I did have to have a stent placement right away for that because the vein was like 50% compressed.
Wow.
So it's simultaneously that they're like, you have May-Thurner syndrome and we think you have lymphedema. Let's wait 4 to 6 weeks. June of 2016, definitively, you have lymphedema. And then in that June, I started the comprehensive decongestive therapy, or CDT,
Right.
to reduce the swelling.
Right. So a real range of emotions, that a roller coaster that
Oh,
you've been through for several
yes,
years. My goodness.
yes. The initial, honestly, diagnosis when my doctor actually called me the night before he was going to put my stent in. And he's like, "Angela, I think you also have lymphedema."
Mm.
And I remember just screaming. And I was like, "No." And he's like, he couldn't understand me because I was so upset. And I was, for me, it's like I went through the cancer
Mm.
treatment, all of that, but I knew enough about lymphedema that there was no cure.
Mm.
And yeah, so there was a range of emotions, definitely. One, I was upset. I was angry, you know, that 9 years later for it to present and show up.
Yeah, I mean, surviving cancer is a battle in itself, as many people have experienced, and then to get lymphedema afterwards is unfair. There's no question
It,
about it.
and I treat things, everyone handles everything differently. So I have sometimes a dry sense of humor. I try to think, treat things with humor. And I was like, yeah, cancer, the gift that keeps giving, can you just, there's, and that's another time, but cancer, the side effects and the treatments, and I'm here to say I would do it again. Of course, it's better than the alternative. Um, but yeah, the side effects is just the long range, and like I said, for 9 years later, just didn't even think. But now, knowing all I know about lymphedema, there's people that are 20 years later, 25 years later, that it'll show up.
Mm, mm. And we know from our own understanding of lymphedema and the research that we've done that cancer survivors, for want of a better phrase, have a high likelihood of getting
Definitely.
lymphedema, especially when lymph nodes have been removed.
Right.
I was quite fortunate in the sense that mine wasn't cancer related.
Hmm.
But back in 2007, I had what they thought was a strangulated hernia in my groin, which was incredibly
Oh,
painful.
oh,
I
that sounds
couldn't, yeah,
painful.
I couldn't stand straight, and it came out of nowhere. It was quite an instant pain.
Right.
So the GP, much like yours, sent me straight to A&E, and literally a matter of 2 or 3 hours, I was on the operating table, having tried to manipulate what they thought was a strangulated hernia into position. Apparently, it's quite dangerous. They decided to operate, which is amazing treatment on the NHS. And anyway, it wasn't a hernia. They took out some lymph nodes, which they said were angry, and
Oh, right.
moldy was described as well, which is a very peculiar word. And the lymph nodes went off for biopsy, and thankfully they came back cancer free, which was great. And I
Right.
went about my normal business. And then 2011, I felt very poorly on Father's Day very quickly.
Hmm.
Um, and within half an hour of getting home, I was curled up in a ball with a fever. And then my
Hmm.
wife decided, time to go to hospital, which they put me in. It was a Sunday, and nothing was around to give me tests.
Right.
So it wasn't until the Tuesday that I got the cultures back from this infection, which happened to be cellulitis. It was the most
Oh,
painful thing I've ever experienced, and this sort of illness, which presented like flu-like symptoms, then had a red spot the size of a penny in the UK. I don't know what this a coin would be, a cent maybe,
right.
I don't know.
Right.
And it just grew rapidly up my leg. It was
Mhm.
like a burning acidic sensation. It was just,
Oh,
oh,
yes.
flame red. So I was in hospital for 2 weeks. Long story short, the cellulitis infection kind of damaged the lymphatics in my left leg, same as your leg, and
Hmm.
then left me with lymphedema. But it was a throwaway line from the vascular specialist, who said, "Oh yeah, you've got lymphedema. It's for life. It's a swollen leg. Go to the supplies team and pick up some
Right.
stockings."
Yeah.
I was
Like
like, "What?
no big deal. Right. Yeah.
No big
Send
deal."
you on your way. Right.
Yeah, off you go. You know,
Right.
pick up your stockings. What? I was 40 years old, and the thought of lifelong stockings, and
Stockings.
oh goodness
Right.
me. But it was just presented in such a throwaway, uh,
Matter of fact.
matter of
Yeah.
fact way. And I don't know how yours was presented or discussed to you, but did your GP or did your specialist know anything about lymphedema? Could they point you in the right direction?
So again, like I said, I went through 6 doctors. The ER doctors said I had venous insufficiency, and I'm like, "What's that?" And they're like, "Well, you're just getting older, so that's just what happens." And what can I do? Oh, nothing. Well, I wasn't satisfied, so I went to my GP who wasn't in, so I saw a substitute, if you will. And then she's like, "Oh, your ankles, it's not bad." But at the time, we still didn't know it was lymphedema. So fast forward, my general practitioner came in on his day off to see me, that's when he connected me with the interventional radiologist. And in between, I'd gone to a vein doctor, and he's like, "You don't have venous insufficiency," but he did think that I had he's the one that found out I had May-Thurner syndrome. So that was kind of serendipitous, if you will. I mean, I was fortunate, lucky about that. But when I went to the interventional radiologist, he did know what lymphedema was, and he actually consulted with doctors out of Mayo. But going back to my general practitioner, straight to me, he just said, "Thank you for being your best advocate, because I would have not diagnosed you with lymphedema."
Wow.
And for him to say that is powerful. I believe, because he's like, I wouldn't have known. I would have sent you home. So I think that takes a lot too. I mean, I know there's still a lot to be done in the medical community for sure about, awareness of lymphedema. But
yeah. And it's odd, and this is what is interesting, how it is in the UK sounds very similar, sadly, to how it is in the US, because we still to this day have GPs that don't quite understand lymphedema and can't necessarily diagnose it.
Right.
And therefore it puts tremendous stress on the patient to come away without the correct diagnosis, and the longer you leave it, of course, the worse lymphedema gets.
Right.
And one of the things that we no doubt can share as a tip, the first hopefully of many, is if you have swelling in a limb that has not gone down over a series of 2 to 3 months, research oedema, research lymphedema online. Avoid Dr. Google, but go to trusted.
Exactly.
Yeah, because you don't want to see those horrific pictures on Google.
Exactly.
Scare yourself senseless, but go to
I was guilty of that. Yes.
Yeah, so was I. Yeah, horrendous. But go to trusted lymphedema sites. And in the US, I know you have Learn, which we can come into a bit later on. We have LSN, we have the BLS, we have Lymphedema United in the UK, who's obviously their websites can be accessed by anybody globally. But the important thing is perhaps to educate yourself and go to your GP and say, "I think I've got lymphedema because
exactly.
Can you diagnose it and give me the correct care, or push me in the direction of people that can look after me?" You almost have to be self a bit pushy, a bit self-educated. And is that something you would echo?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same here, right? And that's probably like one thing that I always try to consistently say is we have to be our best advocates. And I'll go back to, I'm repeating myself, but in my initial diagnosis, it took me 6 doctors, and that's including the ER. Then from there, I went to the GP who was subbing for my doctor, and she's like, "Oh, your ankle, it's not that bad." And I'm like, "But it's not normal." And there's no answers as to why. Then I go to the vein doctor. He's like, "You don't have venous." And, so Dan, I just kept pushing and going to different doctors. And I think it's exhausting. It's mentally draining. But you just have to, because who knows our bodies better than ourselves?
I agree. And talking about cellulitis earlier, with my experience, have you ever had cellulitis?
I have had cellulitis, and I call it the mother load. The same thing. It came out of nowhere. And just to preface, I do always err on the side of being a little chilly or cold. So I started having chills, but didn't think anything of it. Then started having, fever. I took my garment off, noticed that I had red blotches. I knew right away what it was, just from, research. So went to urgent care. They actually knew that it was cellulitis. Gave me an injection, some pills, and like, if it gets worse, go to ER. So I did end up having to go to ER like 4 hours later, because it did get worse. And then I was admitted. I was in the hospital for a week. To quote my doctor, he said it was the most impressive case of cellulitis that he'd ever seen. And I thought, that's not really what I want to be known for, but okay. It was the same as yours. This, the pain, that my entire leg was red,
Mm.
solid red. There was like, think one white patch.
Mm.
My temperature was like 104.5. In the hospital for a week. They ended up getting an infectious disease doctor as
Mm.
well.
Right,
Then
yeah.
I was sent home with a PICC line for 3 weeks.
Mm.
And yeah, very painful. It I think even then I had to be my advocate as well. They knew about cellulitis, but they'd never, I guess, had one this extreme.
Mm.
And they were wanting to put a garment, a TED hose on me, and I wouldn't let them because I still had a fever.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, I was calling my lymphedema therapist, reaching out to some doctors and for guidance. Um, and that was very bad. I mean, I in hindsight now, I didn't realize how sick I
Mm.
was.
Mm.
But
It,
yeah.
it's absolutely horrendous. And, you
Hmm.
know, oddly, um, you had cellulitis after being correctly diagnosed with lymphedema.
Hmm.
Uh, the cellulitis, nobody knew what it was when it hit me, and I didn't have lymphedema at that time, so I couldn't self-research. I didn't have a clue. I just, saw this red leg and thought, my goodness. But it's like, having acid poured down your leg. I could
Right.
barely walk,
Hmm.
and you're absolutely right. It's not just the 1 or the 2 weeks in hospital, it's the home recovery that takes weeks and weeks and weeks before you're in a position to go back to work.
Exactly.
And one of the things I'm very keen on, and there's a page on my website dedicated to cellulitis with two professors talking about the guidance and what
Mhm.
cellulitis is, what to look out for, and how to treat it. And I felt it worth mentioning today for anybody who has lymphedema and hasn't had cellulitis.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's about how can you help prevent getting cellulitis,
Mhm.
and there's tips that we can give you and I am sure. There are tips the experts can give both on the website and in my book, but silly things like gardening, wearing
Right,
gardening gloves and protective
right.
clothing to prevent even a scratch from a thorn, or uh,
Mhm.
that could cause an opening in your
Mhm.
affected limb, which theoretically then leads to, or could lead to, an infection. Um,
Right,
uh,
right.
is there any tips that spring to mind that worked for you? To
So that,
knowing what
you know,
what it was,
yeah.
how painful it was.
So here's what's interesting for me. When I had cellulitis, they found no cuts, no scrapes. So that but they were adamant that I had to have had something. But again, this happened overnight. This happened in less than 24 hours. So it was a Sunday evening, and by Monday, I was in the hospital. And I kept saying, I have cellulitis because I have lymphedema. I believe that because we have lymphedema, we're just more susceptible
Mhm.
to having it. Because I feel that I do try to do everything to prevent it. And to all your points, the same thing. Gardening, even like shaving.
Mhm.
There's so many things that we need to be so careful about. Even if I'm hiking, wear long pants, long, it's in the arm, long sleeves, um, manicures. But even like doing all of those things, I believe it's still, because every fall, I think I shared this with you in a previous call, is I get what I call cellulitis light.
Mhm.
It lasts like maybe 24 hours a day, but it's every October through November. And it'll be in my left leg. Sometimes it's just little spots. And I have a script of doxycycline on the ready at all times.
Mhm.
And I start taking that and it goes away. So I'm baffled as to why I continue every fall to get that. Yet I feel that I'm doing everything that I can. Am I 100%? No. But again, every time I get it, there's no signs of a cut or a scrape.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
that's always interesting to me. But at the same time, I still think we have to try to, like I always say, be aware. Always
mm,
be aware of what can cause it.
mm. There's advice on the website from a UK perspective specifically, but I
Huh?
think it would translate quite well across the world. And there are examples of of symptoms, and
Hmm.
when to call the GP, when
Hmm.
to call what we have is 111, which is like a helpline
Oh, okay.
run by the National Health Service, and when to call 999, which is when it's serious and you need an ambulance.
Hmm.
And there's a criteria of each of those three that are published by the
Okay.
NHS to help people with symptoms or showing symptoms of cellulitis. And
Right.
once you've had it, I guess perhaps it's similar to me. I carry an emergency pack
Hmm.
when I go away from home, and including you mentioned
Yeah.
your tablets, your antibiotics. I have antibiotics that are suitable for me, which are penicillin based. But some people are allergic to penicillin, of course.
Right.
But in there are also hygienic wipes and plasters, and you name it. There's a whole list of things that again I've published to help people to put their emergency pack together. So if they're away from
Yeah.
home, like you said earlier, and you show signs, then you've got a kit bag to hand to help you until you can seek medical help.
Right. And it is. The symptoms for me now is the shivers,
Mm,
being cold, a little bit of the it's a fatigue, but a different fatigue. And then obviously the red spots.
mm,
Now
mm,
there's
yeah,
different to your point, there's different levels of that where I know that, sometimes I haven't had fever or
mm,
chills,
mm.
but I see the red spots.
It's a warning sign, isn't it? And of course,
Right.
lymphedema, as we've both experienced, isn't about just these physical challenges
No.
and sort of side challenges of cellulitis to deal with. I can speak personally, and I do pour everything into my book for an emotional perspective, talking about the mental challenges of lymphedema and that whole time of getting your head around the
Right.
diagnosis and the life changes that you have to make. And
Right.
that continues, doesn't it? Before
Oh,
I
yeah.
waffle on about mine, let's hear from you about how you dealt with it and coped, and
Right.
coping mechanisms you can share.
Definitely. So it's the mental, the physical, and the cost. It's just they're all it's stressful. It takes a toll, I think, obviously on the patient and your caregivers. Um, as much as people, try to understand it, no one understands more than others who have it, correct? Um, but again, when I was initially diagnosed, I was getting ready to go to a wedding, our son's wedding. Then I was diagnosed, and I could not find any shoes that would fit. And this is before I was able to get into my therapy. And I remember just sitting in the floor of my closet, just crying. I'm like, oh my God, what? I couldn't even fit in like a size 10 flip flop, and I wear a size 7 shoe.
Wow, wow, wow.
And, I thought, okay, I found a pair, it all worked out. But from that point forward, I was like, I got to channel my energy in a way to, to this is how it's going to be. I'm going to live with this. I can do this. And yeah, then it was more of the mind switch, if you will. And when I got wrapped, my lymphedema therapist asked me, she's like, do you want to put, because she said, bring a long dress or skirt. And then I said, well, let me see if my shorts fit over all my bandages. And they did. And I said, no, I'm gonna wear my shorts. I'm not gonna change who I am. That was for me. That was my way of dealing with it. Cause and I walked out and so to speak, never looked back. And
Well,
but it
I,
takes a lot, and everyone is different, you know.
you're absolutely right, and I really admire that of you, to embrace it, especially after the wedding situation. I mean, crikey,
Right.
we've probably all experienced that, whether it's upper limb or lower limb, or sadly some people have got both. Your wardrobe that was becomes redundant. The
Yes.
number of pairs of trousers that I had to give to charity, or the shoes that no
Hmm.
longer fitted on my
Yep.
left foot.
Hmm.
And at the age of 40, I built up a reasonable array of suits because I worked in a
Right.
professional environment. and I'd end up going to, I'll never forget this, 6 or 7 months after um, getting lymphedema, we were doing the annual appraisals with the team, with the staff,
Uh-huh.
and I had I had a shirt and tie and a suit jacket and
Uh-huh.
huge clown-like jeans with trainers opened as far as I possibly could on my left foot. Um, because that's all I could get in, with
Right,
these
right,
jumbo clown-like jeans, and it was such a difficult time to get over the whole mental "I've got this for the rest of my life" situation, but then to change your whole style and the confidence of your
right,
clothing
right,
completely affected me, and my self-esteem, my self-confidence just plummeted. And I know that may
right.
sound a bit shallow, but
No, not at
um,
all. No, no.
I think maybe it's a bit British, I don't know, but the clothes maketh the man and all that kind of stuff. Um, but it was such a contrast to where I was. So one of the tips and solutions that I can share now, and I've spent a lot of years um, trialing and buying clothes online. On
Mhm.
my website, there are clothing and shoe companies that are
Okay,
able
right.
to help people with lymphedema.
Mhm.
And some of them are online services where they do made to
Yeah.
measure jeans and made to measure shoes and made to measure
Mhm.
trousers and blouses and shirts. Um, which are a fraction of the price of probably going to the high street or a shopping mall, I guess, and getting
Right.
professionally done by a tailor. But there are all sorts of solutions on the website that have
Mhm.
worked for me, and I'm delighted to be able to pass those on to anybody that can help. But we do need more companies on there. So
Right.
if the audience knows of any clothing companies or shoe companies that would benefit others, then please get in contact with either of us, and
Right.
we can make a noise about it online and on the website to share that, because
Mhm.
clothes are so important. And
Oh, they are. Right. And I think, and we may have talked about this, but I think Zappos, Zappos, they will make different, you can order, it's online, but you can order different sizes.
yeah, the what we've also discussed, of course, is that um, companies that will deliver to the US, but thanks to good old Brexit, will struggle
Oh, right.
delivering to
Yeah.
the UK now that we've moved out of the EU. So there are companies on board that um, hopefully will cover both markets. Um, but the other thing to mention, I guess, which I know you are very visual with your social media, um, and people can get in contact with you via Instagram,
Right.
um, is the support. We're not alone, are we? People are not alone. If they've got
No.
lymphedema and they're going through the challenges and stresses that we've been through,
Mhm.
they should reach out. They should
Yes,
reach out and find support. And what support do you have in the US? Do you have support groups online and things like that?
we do. So the ones that pop in my head that, that I've been a part of and used is, well, there's Lymphy Strong Facebook group, which is very popular. And then there's local support groups that I participate. I'm in Colorado, so there's local support groups. Um, right now, we've been doing a lot of online
Yep.
support groups that I participate in as well. I would say definitely, friends, family, are also good. And then as far as like the websites, Learn has a wealth of information, and they have a list of, I believe, support groups out there on their resources page as well.
Fantastic. And, Learn are on my website as well. Just jump on the page on Meet the Organizations. And they've got, as you say, a wealth of information, as has the Lymphedema Support Network in the UK. And they also
Yeah,
list on their newsletters, the support groups are available. One of the projects I'm working on in the UK at the beginning of next year, and I can't remember whether I've spoken to you about this, is I'm collaborating with 4 other online support groups and website owners um, and we've all messaged our followers and our members to say, look, who's interested? in
Uh-huh.
getting together for a cup of coffee in a local meetup face to face. So, for example, between us, we've got many thousands of followers and members.
Right.
And I'm waving my arms around here. This isn't very good, is it? So I could be saying, for example, I'm in Tunbridge Wells in Kent on Thursday, the 7th of November. Who wants to meet me for a cup of coffee? If you've got
Nice.
lymphedema, I'll be there, and these other groups will promote it.
Yeah.
And we're piloting one before Christmas and one after Christmas, ready to launch
Okay.
in April. So that sort of brings together the post-lockdown virtual life that we've all had. So, and
Exactly.
even if 2 or 3 people get together and find a fellow, in inverted commas, lymphy,
Right.
that they can share their stories,
Right.
experiences, and use as support, then that'll be a big help. I wish I'd
Oh,
had it.
it is.
Us men, we don't like to talk, Angela. I know this is probably the same
I was
worldwide over.
right. I was going to say because you're breaking boundaries, so to speak. I mean, it's amazing what you're doing because it is true. Like we've talked in the past, I think, especially from males, from a male perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we're both trying to do our bit, and if I can get, as I did with the golf day, a handful of guys who have met since, and friendships have been formed for life for attending a charity golf day and raising a few quid for charity.
Right.
If us fellas do end up speaking to other people, it transpires with lymphedema, and that's what drives me forward to get other men meeting up and talking. I'm very conscious of the fact that we haven't gone into the day in the life of a lymphy.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
I've just got a reminder to say we've got 5 minutes left
Oh,
of
wow. Okay.
this. So it may well be, Angela, that we perhaps do a second one,
Okay.
drilling into the typical life, which, as you touched on earlier, is very time consuming.
Hmm.
Um, but run through a few of the top topics that you
Right. The
use
day in the
yourself
life.
on the to look after
Right.
yourself, self-manage or self-care.
Yeah. I mean, definitely daily. I mean, again, skincare is important. So I do put lotion. I like it's called La Roche Posay or Eucerin. I use both of those. It's fine with my garment. I try to get movement every day, whether it's working out. For me, I find strength training, just the muscle contraction really helps
Mm.
with moving my lymph. I wear my compression every day. I have a night garment, a pump, and I try to see my lymphedema therapist probably every other month. I haven't been in a couple months, but just to keep things in check.
Yeah, and that is a great summary, a great broad brush, but obviously these are quite time consuming.
Yep.
And some of the things that I've been um, introducing to my self-care routine, which I'd never done before, was dry brushing, deep breathing
Mm.
exercises.
Mhm.
I'm trying to learn SLD, which is self-lymphatic
Right.
drainage, because unfortunately not everywhere in the UK will provide MLD, manual lymphatic drainage, on the
Okay.
NHS, so we have to pay for it. Some that get the time will provide it, but SLD you can do in the comfort of your own home. But
Right.
I'm rubbish at learning stuff. I need to be taught properly. So I need
Right.
a lymphedema therapist to show me how to open all my bits and pieces before I start draining. But dry brushing is a good technique,
Mhm.
which I'm going to do a webinar on in due course. Wraps. I don't know about yourself, whether you use Velcro wraps if the
I
swelling starts to
Yeah.
become a
I
problem.
um I honestly just haven't had to use wraps since like 2018.
Oh,
My
right.
leg is just it's very stable. So I'm very thankful for that. But I would do it again in a heartbeat if I had to, even though it's not fun, but it
Yeah.
works.
And they do act as, I mean, I don't know about you, but our appointments with our therapists on the NHS are between 6 and 8 months apart. So it's very important that we learn how to self-care, to self-manage the
Yes.
condition.
Yes.
And we're not all experts with bandaging. I'd love to be taught how to do it, but the wraps act as a good sort of temporary measure if you're seeing some rebound swelling. Is just a
Right.
Velcro. But like you, I wear a nighttime garment as well as daytime. I have used a pump. But one thing that I've got on my list here, which we must mention, is hydration as well as movement. keeping your
Yes,
body
yes,
hydrated with
yes.
water, and
Right,
and not putting too many toxins in.
right, exactly. That yeah, I always have water, like a hydro flask type of container, like with me all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it's something that I'm a squash person. I don't know if you have like cordial or squash, but today, especially for you, I've got a glass of water so you won't. So I think there might be
Yeah,
an idea to for us to do a second one, going into a bit more depth about the elements of self-care, self-managing
right,
the condition, and one of the elements that we were talking about opening this up to the audience is if they had any specific questions that they would like people living with lymphedema to answer,
right.
you and I.
Yes, yeah,
And that could be, specific to the countries we live in, or generic that actually is a global discipline for
right.
lymphedema self-care. So tell me, Funky Lymphedema, about your social media site. How can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at funky underscore lymphedema. And yeah, just direct message me, and then my email is also on my bio. This is the best way to get a hold of me.
Fantastic. And for those who wish to ask me, and even though I'm a fella, I do have many female members who have contacted me as well, and followers, but my details are on the screen. Matt@lymphunited.com is my email address. Lymphedemaunited.com is the website. Social media is at Lymph United. The reason for that is because the Americans spell it wrong. They don't put the O in. So Lymph United for YouTube, and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, etc., etc. So drop us a question, and then we can build that into our future episode. But thank you, Angela. It's been an absolute
Oh, thank
pleasure.
you so much. It went
Been
quick.
great, and I will see you soon. And thank you everyone for
All
tuning
right.
in and listening. And we hope to see you on another webinar video soon. Take
All
care, all.
right.
Look after yourself and self care.